Hello, I'm Michael Embry, and welcome to our third program featuring authors from the upcoming Kentucky Book Fair. This year will be our 33rd annual Kentucky Book Fair, and it will be held at the Frankfort Convention Center on November the 15th. The hours are 9 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. It's a free event, and we'll have authors there to discuss their books, read from their books, sign their books, all sorts of things. And it's a free afternoon for the family, and it is a family-oriented kind of event. The book fair actually begins on November the 14th, the day before, with our 4th annual Children's Day. That's from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. And we'll have about 35 authors there. Again, they'll be reading from their works. They'll be conducting little workshops, doing art kind of things. So be sure and mark your calendar for November 14th for the Children's Day and November 15th for the 33rd Annual Kentucky Book Fair. Now, among the authors attending this year, we'll have one of our all-time favorites. He's been here several times, Wendell Berry. He's got a new book out. Another author will be Nick Clooney, George Clooney's dad. A very nice fella, and drop by and see him. Another author will be Louise Harrison. That may not ring a bell unless you're a Beatles fan. And there was a guy in the Beatles, Fab Four, his name was George Harrison. Louise is George's older sister, and she's written a book called My Kid Brother's Band. So they say she's a lot of fun, and she likes to interact with people, so you want to see her. Another attendee will be Ann B. Ross. She's a New York Times best-selling author, and she has 2 new books. Gwen Hyman Rubio, about 10, 12 years ago, she had a book that was an Oprah selection. It was called Icy Sparks. Now she has a new novel out, and it's called Love and Ordinary Creatures. So this will be kind of her debut as well. Romance author Liz Beverly from Louisville. Another one is Madeline Rue, a best-selling young adult author from New York. So we have a star-studded event, and we hope to see you there. Now, I want to remind you that proceeds from the Kentucky Book Fair go to benefit school and public libraries and literacy programs. In the 32 past book fairs, we've raised more than $365,000. So when you buy books, you're helping your communities. So we hope to see you there. And today we have 3 of our authors. We have Ed Lawrence, Stephen Vest, and Nancy Cook Farley. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And Ed, you have a book out. And what's the name of it?
It's Kentucky 120, and it's a collection of photographs from all 120 counties. Mm-hmm. I really never set out to make a book with that idea. About 10 years ago, I started, I picked up a digital camera and started taking photographs, and I'd go out on the back roads and just take photographs of things that interested me, and they were always landscapes. Mm-hmm. And then I was getting so many photographs that I had to figure out a way to catalog them. So I started doing by counties, and then I realized I had about 20 counties covered, and so it became a personal challenge for me to get all 120 counties. Mm-hmm. Well, then once I had 120 counties, what do you do with these thousands of photographs? Uh-huh. So that's where the book came in. And I had been selling prints at Ann Tower Gallery in Lexington, but mm-hmm. I thought with a book I could share the photographs with a lot more people.
So this took, what, you say about 10 years?
It's been a 10-year project.
How many photographs did you take? I mean, do you have any?
I'd say around 20,000.
20,000.
I got it narrowed down to, when I started thinking in terms of a book, I got it narrowed down to about 3 or 4 from each county. And then I enlisted some artist friends of mine, Arturo Sandoval mm-hmm. and Marianne. Marianne, what's her last name? Marianne
Miller, right?
No, she's a pastel artist.
Okay.
I know who you're talking about.
And then my sister, Pat Lawrence, who's an artist in her own right. Mariana McDonald.
That's
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say that.
Sorry, Mariana. And so I had them curate the book, if you will. So I went through, and the ones that they chose the most, that's how they got selected. And then the book itself is page after page of photographs, and all of the photographs are in alphabetical order. And then in the back, I have an index, which is a thumbnail index, and it shows a map of Kentucky for each county, so you know where the county is and the date that I shot it. And so there's a lot of different ways to look at the book.
Did you ever have to, after going through all your 20,000 photographs, did you have to go back to any of the counties because you maybe weren't that satisfied with, or is that fair?
What happened is there was one photograph that was from Breckinridge County, I think, and I had taken it about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was a photo of a dock on a pond, and it was a chartreuse dock, and the pond was like this teal blue, and it was a beautiful photograph, but I wasn't really sure that it was Breckinridge County. So right before we were going to press, I went out to Breckinridge County, and I hunted and hunted and hunted for it, and I couldn't find it. So I took another photograph just to be sure that I was in Breckinridge County.
You know, it's now you got what, one photograph from each county. So you got 120 photographs, and
right.
Of course, that seems like it would really be difficult to sit there and find something that would really be unique and kind of represent that county. That's a lot of work in that one.
Well, you know, it was more, it's kind of like going fishing, you know, you go out and maybe you get something and maybe you don't, but you have a good time going out.
Yeah.
You know, it's that sort of thing. And it all depends. Like the Kentucky Gazetteer is my friend because it has gotten me home many times. Yeah. But I go out without really targeting any particular area. I just go out, and then when I see something that is, like, if I were painting, it would be a scene that I would paint, you know, and then I photograph. And sometimes I'll see great things, but the lighting won't be right, you know, so I just have to pass it by. There's always something to take a photograph of.
Have you had the photography? Has it been a hobby, a lifelong hobby for you? Or?
Yeah, I started out when I was I think I got my first camera when I was 9. And then professionally, I became a graphic designer. And I was living in DC then, and I still used the camera. I like Instamatics because they were quick and easy. And my compositions are always pretty simplistic. So the quality of a camera doesn't really make that much difference. I'm not a camera freak at all. So what I was saying is that I did Instamatic, and then I did Polaroid for a while. I love Polaroid, and I had a few shows in New York and London off of the, well, I got into shows. I didn't have solo shows from the Polaroid experience. And then I had kids and put the camera down. And then my son, when he was in high school, he found the camera, and he took an interest in it. So we went out chasing sunsets, if you will, and it was like our father-son thing. He's a really good photographer, but I just can't get him to do it, you know. And we had this debate about, because that's when I got my digital camera, and he was using my old film camera, and he was like, "Oh, film's the only way to go, only film." And I was like, no, you got to get on. So he's gotten on board.
Well, do you have some more photography books planned, or is this going to rest?
There are some projects in the works. In order to, this is a self-published book, and in order to do that, formed a publishing company. What I hope to do in the future is, there are a lot of great photographers in Kentucky, and I hope to, and a lot of great artists, and I hope to be able to publish some of their works too. So I made this really stupid 2014 New Year's resolution to go out and take a photograph every day. And at 6 degrees below zero, I was like, what was I doing? But I'll have a nice portfolio at the end of it.
Oh, okay. Well, Ed, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Hope everything goes well at the book fair for you.
I'm excited to be at the book fair. I've always been as a customer, but I feel really honored to be selected to be at the book fair.
Well, it's the experience is entirely different on the other side of the table.
I
So
bet.
I hope you sell lots of books.
Thank you.
All righty. Steve Vest, how
Yes.
you doing, sir?
Good to see you.
And what's your book?
My book is called Unexpected Inheritance. That's about the 5th or 6th different title of the book, but it's a book that's about collective memory. And it started off as my project, as my MFA thesis project at Murray State. And a lot of it has to do with my parents, who were older when I was born, and my grandmother.
Okay.
And I wrote a story about my dad, and then I wrote a story about my grandmother. And when I shared those with my mother, she said that the story I wrote about my father was flawless. It might have had one geographic location incorrect, but then the story about my grandmother was completely wrong. Nothing in it was right. And the stories are the same stories, so one can't be correct and the other one be incorrect, but they're about the same people doing the same things. So the third part of the book is about my mom and I trying to argue through what is true and what is not true. And it's all focused on, kind of a coming of age type story and the impact of this older generation on this little kid.
Okay, it's so you said it was a product of your MSU.
Yes, when I was
there,
down at Murray State working on my master's degree.
So 2011, I believe, when you.
That's when I graduated.
So 3 years since then. So you spent time going over it and over it.
Quite a bit, and it has evolved and changed from what the thesis project was, because in between the parts about my grandmother, my father, and my mother are parts about me and the impact I believe that I'm possibly having on my own children, which only time will tell if those are true or not. But that's what it's really kind of about, is the truth and the fallibility of memory, and the way I remember things, I'm sure, is very different from the way my brothers and my parents remember things.
Have they seen any of that? Your brothers or?
My oldest brother has seen a little bit. My mother has seen everything except for the stuff about herself. So,
Okay. So she's
that'll
gonna
be an
get
interesting
surprised.
revelation. And my children have not seen any of it. So it'll be interesting to see what their reaction is to some of the stuff in the book.
So this isn't your first book.
Oh, no, this is, it's my first, what I consider my first true book. I've had collections of columns, anthologies, that type of thing. But this is an actual book with a beginning, middle, and end.
So it's would it fall under what, creative nonfiction, or?
It's creative nonfiction. I consider it to be a fractured memoir. It is a memoir, but it's told in a very fractured style. You might be reading about something in 1967, and then it's 1984, and then it's 1975, but they all tie together in a theme.
Steve, of course, is the editor and publisher of Kentucky Monthly Magazine, and he's written many, many columns. And did you find this more satisfying than writing some of your other writing endeavors? Or?
Well, it certainly allows you to go in depth and explain. In the column, I'm able to tell a little story.
Right.
But in this, I'm able to tell a story, but I'm also able to tell the meaning behind the story and the background that makes the story a little bit more deep and interesting, or at least I hope I did.
Well, even on that, did you find that you learned something more about yourself?
I learned a lot of
digging-
things I didn't want to learn about
Right,
myself, actually. Yeah, and there are a few stories in the writing process. There's many stories in the book that are stories that every family tells. when you tell it, it gets embellished, and you tell it again, and everybody knows the story. They've heard that story. Right. But there are a few stories in the book that had never been told, and I had never repeated them at all until they appeared on the page. And some of those surprised me because they were things I'd put out of my mind and hadn't thought about in 40 years. And those are some kind of surprising moments when something comes to life on the page.
What was there anything that really kind of triggered those memories? I mean, did you look at old photographs or just casual conversation with siblings?
A little bit of both. I mean, my dad was an avid photographer, so there's a lot of photographs, many slides that we had, and he took pictures of just about everything we did. And those are some of the things that were interesting when I'd be writing a section, and then I'd go find a photograph of what I was writing about. And I'd have, I had written a description of the clothing. None of it matched. Yeah. In other cases, it matched exactly. Yeah. And it depended on really how the story had been told. And so then I was able to go back and add some more detail from that. And then from conversations, there's quite a few conversations in the book with my older brother about these people. He kind of filled in some of the gaps of the things I didn't know. Because he's 16 years older than I am, so he has a much different perspective than I had.
I guess you've moved around some too. You've lived in Maryland and Ohio. I assume some of these places, some of these stories take place in.
They do. Most of the book takes place in either Louisville, Kentucky, Heber Heights, Ohio, or Catonsville, Maryland, or the interstates between those places and Clearwater, Florida, where my grandmother lived. So a lot of it takes place in Georgia. Yeah. Up and down Interstate 75. And one of the original titles of the book did have to do with cars. And I think it's appropriate, the picture of my grandmother, she's standing on the beach surrounded by cars.
That's your grandmother, okay.
Yeah, and we had really bad, terrible used cars throughout most of my life. So many of the stories have to do with cars breaking down or us being lost or something to do with a car. And they almost all have to do with Mamaw.
Is there going to be a volume 2 of this, or is it?
We'll have to see. We'll have to see if I survive the reaction of the family and my mother and everybody else. So.
Well, Steve, you've been around the Kentucky Book Fair a lot. As your Kentucky Monthly, I believe, is one of the sponsors.
Yes.
You've been there as an author.
I believe this is my 4th time as an author.
Okay.
And Kentucky Monthly has been there every year for the past 16 years since we started it back in the day, and really proud to be a part of it. I know how hard it is to get into the book fair, and to even be accepted into the book fair once is a great accomplishment.
Right.
So.
And well, listen, I appreciate you being here, and I hope your book sells as well as Ed's.
Yeah. Maybe we can go on a book tour together.
All right.
And our next guest is Nancy Cook Farley. And Nancy, what's your book?
The name of my book is Bubblegum Memories and Beyond.
Okay, that sounds like it might be an oldies book.
It is. It's based on my life growing up in the 50s and 60s. Oh. I grew up in northeastern Kentucky in Ashland.
Okay. And did you go to Ashland Blazer High School?
No, I was a Boyd County graduate.
Oh, Boyd County,
yes.
Okay. And so it's is it about your teen years and or your formative years?
Both. Actually, it goes back to the very beginning. Some of my earliest memories in the 50s, they were, I call it bubblegum because it was the age of innocence. Just a lot of the things that happened to me during my childhood and growing up in the country on a farm. And then it transitions on into the 1960s. I spent my elementary and high school years, my elementary years in the 50s, and in the 60s, my high school and college years. Okay. And it talks about the change in culture that I experienced during those 2 decades. A great difference.
What prompted you? Is this your first book?
This is my first book.
Why did you decide to write a book? I mean,
why did I decide?
Because it's a lot of work.
Well, I owe a great deal of gratitude to Carl West, who's the editor of the former editor of the State Journal. Several years ago, I went on a trip with my high school friends to Gatlinburg, And we wrote something in the little journal thing, when you leave. And they looked at that and they said, well, you should write. This was what you said was good. So I said, really? So sometime later, I wrote about that trip and sent it to the State Journal. And Carl West saw it, liked it, published it. And after that, I wrote for the State Journal for 5 years.
Okay.
And he's the one that really encouraged me to write the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like, from Steve talking about his book, that yours is, you're looking back into your past as well. Was it difficult, or did you, what kind of research, or was it just off the top? I wasn't off the top of your head, but did you look at photographs and just, talk to friends and to conjure up the memories?
Well, fortunately, my memory of what happened 40 years ago is better than what I did last week.
Radio.
So I just, I was looking at old pictures and visiting with old friends, and I just remembered a lot of the things that happened. And I wanted to write this for those who, my grandchildren, and those who might not remember what life was like back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And that change that I saw, some of the results that we're seeing today of the change that I saw in the 60s.
Well, I guess I'm kind of a child of the 60s too, and things have changed a lot.
Yes, they have.
I understand you're a former school teacher at Franklin County? Or?
I am. I started my career at Franklin County High School in 1970. I taught for a few years, took off a while to raise my family, and I ended up resuming my career at Kentucky State University. I worked as an instructional counselor and English teacher for 20 years until I retired.
Okay, so do you have any other books planned, or?
Oh, yes.
Do you?
Yes, I
Okay.
have